So first off, thank you guys for jumping on here. I do appreciate it. Again, last minute notice. But like I said before, once it pops into my head, I throw it out there. I make sure you guys get the information. Now, this is what I want to cover today is something I haven't done or covered. I don't think in a long, long time about being in the business leadership. Okay. And I got a PowerPoint. I'm going to go through the PowerPoint, which just kind of keeps me on track. It'll kind of help you a little bit. More than likely, this is going to be on my podcast as well. So it'll be an audio version. So obviously you can't see the PowerPoint, but there's no really images or anything you need. But what I want to tell you is I got started in network marketing back in 1997 and coming out of this. And the only thing I understood about leadership was when I was a bouncer back then, believe it or not. I was actually pretty big, stocky guy. I weighed about 210, could bench 400, had a mohawk. You guys probably don't ever guess that or picture me as that, but that's the, I wore combat fatigues and army boots when I worked, as a bouncer, and I was real mean, had earrings, piercings, and anyhow, the only thing I knew about leadership was I was usually the first guy in, and people basically respect me enough to follow. Okay, so that was the extent of it. Luckily, I did find network marketing, and I really, really got to learn from some people in the network marketing space on what real leadership was, and more importantly, like how to drive and create a community and a culture that people would want to follow. Okay, so that's kind of the thing. It started like really, I was kind of forced into a leadership role when I first company in 1997. I used to go every week to a hotel meeting that a gentleman there would give the presentation every week. And I was very dependent on that meeting every week. So every week I would show up, I would invite guests, some would show, some wouldn't. Okay. But I sat through every one of them. And that was my, way I was building the business. The problem happened not too long, probably a few months after I had joined, where the guy that was running the meetings actually was moving. He was not going to do the meetings in our local area, and he moved out of town. He moved to start opening another network. Well, he didn't develop any leaders in that area, so the meeting immediately shut down, and anything that was there disappeared. And so I was really, really upset. I was disappointed. I was frustrated. And what happened was I ended up going to a big event, a convention. And I remember running into one of the top money earners there, and I ran up to him and I complained that I said, this guy was doing all the meetings and he's left and I can't get him to come back up and do anything. And it was so funny. The guy put his arm around me and he says, you know what, Mike, it's okay to go ahead and be the leader. And it kind of put me at pause when he said that, because all this time I had been looking for other people to lift me up, other people to do the heavy lifting, other people to get in front of the room, that kind of thing. And eventually I realized that the people in front of the room, quote unquote, were the ones that were typically making the most money. And it wasn't necessarily because they were the presenters, but it was because the mindset that they had adopted was the leader. Okay. And the leadership. So that's just kind of how I got kind of kicked into it. The other thing too is I was so fast forward to where I've done well in the industry. I've made some money. I think I've been doing pretty good. And I remember being stuck. My income was kind of that it felt like I was just had my head hitting the lid. The law of the lid. You've probably heard of that before. And I couldn't figure out what I had to do to break through this. And I was always thinking about, different recruiting techniques and different strategies and things like that. And a guy that was making about $225,000 a month in his company at the time, we were having lunch and I was telling him these things. And he said, you know what, you're the best recruiter I've ever seen. He says, it has nothing to do with that. He says, what you need to start studying is leadership. And I kind of paused because I thought, that I was being a leader. And he said that there's different things that you're missing, that if you start studying some of these things, it'll probably take that lid off. And sure enough, it took a little bit of time because it all comes down to personal development in most cases. And after doing that, it seemed like the lid finally came off of my business. Okay. So based on all that I'm talking to you guys about, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint because I think you're going to really enjoy it today. I'm going to leave myself, if the slides look a little off kilter, it's because I had to adjust them so you could see my face at the same time, because I like to talk to you guys. So the title of this is really launching your leadership. Okay. Now, leadership, there's kind of what leadership means, or what it means to be a leader, is actually a pathfinder. And leadership should not be confused with popularity. Leadership should not be confused with popularity, and you lead people and you manage systems. Okay. One of the biggest things that I see happen a lot of times is people try to manage people. Like, when somebody enrolls somebody into their business, they all of a sudden go into manager mode. And that's not what you want. What you want is to inspire people. Okay. So the other thing right there in the middle, the leadership should not be confused with popularity. The problem we have in today's day and age of social media is you might see somebody that gets, let's use, just be blunt. I'm not going to pull any punches here. Let's say some really, really attractive girl gets 700 likes on her photo, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean she's a leader. It means she's hot, or something along those lines, right? Or let's say you didn't know me and I took a picture with, a famous celebrity like Michael Jordan, and I get 10,000 likes on my photo. It doesn't mean that I'm a leader, right? Or has any skill, or even that Michael Jordan knows who I am. So you have to be very careful also in your walk of doing the business, as to who you identify as leaders and who you follow. Okay. So that's real important. Also, leadership is a mindset. Like I said this, and like this was kind of leading me into this whole talk, was that I had to finally make the decision that I was going to be the leader. Okay, that my success was not going to be a result if somebody was doing 3-ways for me, if somebody was doing the meetings for me, if this was happening or this was happening. I made the decision that I was going to be the leader. Now, the other thing too is a lot of times leadership is lonely. Now that seems kind of strange, because you think that as a great leader that everybody's following you, but that's not necessarily the case, because a lot of times you'll see that there will be distance between some people, because there are people that will be offended at your leadership, because they a lot of times will second guess where they are, and a lot of times they'll point to who you are, and the jealousy that they don't realize is popping up. A lot of times they'll kind of back off of who you are, that kind of thing. Okay. So just understand that sometimes, big leadership is lonely. And like leadership and a mindset is kind of the same as the decision. Okay. Now here's something that should be obvious to you. True leaders serve others. The one thing that I've always tried to do, because, one, I believe in, I believe in the principles in the Bible, and it says the least, the least shall be greatest, that kind of thing. And it always says, if you give, it'll be given unto you. But true leaders serve. Okay. True leaders serve, first and foremost. And you'll see that the best leaders, and the leaders that actually have the largest followings, are typically based around people really know that that leader has their best interest in mind. So when you're talking to people, or you're bringing people on board to your business, you need to always be asking yourself, is this self-serving, or am I serving that person? Because you'll identify some strengths and weaknesses there that you're going to have to work on. Okay. They do not wish to be served. Yeah, leaders do not wish to be served. Leaders get rewarded for stepping up, not showing up. How many times I think it's hilarious when I see people come to meetings or events and so on, and people think they're a leader because they're actually in the event or they showed up. I like the culture, if you have a good culture, the good correct culture, you're rewarding people for the right activities, which is stepping up versus showing up. I know I got part of that I'm going to talk about later on in a couple slides. This is important. Back to kind of even on the same lines as this. Titles earn you the right to lead. Titles earn you the right to lead, and leadership is performance, not position. Okay. I typically never brag, or you'll never hear me brag about a level I'm at in a business, what rank I'm at, that kind of thing, what income I'm at. You won't hear me, you'll never, in 99% of the time, you will never hear me say that unless I'm asked, right? Unless somebody asks and it's a direct question. And I'm usually cautious when I answer it to begin with, because I always want to, I pause for a moment to identify why the question came up to begin with. But titles earn you the right to lead. Okay, leadership is performance, not position. This is a good one right here. I'm glad I remembered this. I remember my pastor so I've been going to the same church now for about 23 years, and one of the only reasons I go to this church, or have gone to this church, is my pastor was a business person before he was in a minister. And the reason it resonated with me is because I was becoming an entrepreneur, and it was just amazing. And he was showing all the biblical principles that went in line with this, and why you can't give to the poor if you're one of them, and if and God really does want you to have some finances so you can actually help people. Okay, that's what it actually says. That's the facts. I could do an entire teaching on that. But one of the things was with his business. He owns, and still to this day, he's got a company he's had for like 35 years that does millions and millions of dollars of revenue. And one of the things he always used to talk about is that he identified eventually that he used to want it more for his people than they did for themselves a lot of times. And what had happened was he finally came to the realization that you can't force anybody to do anything. I know that for a fact. I've bought into this. But he said the number one thing that you owe, the only thing, in fact, that you actually owe your team or your people that follow you, is an example of success. It's still ultimately going to be up to them to actually lead this thing, to actually do the work that it takes. Okay, so that's just a really good one. The other thing about leadership is leaders cast vision. You've heard this many times in any of the trainings we've done so far, or you've heard me or any of the other leaders out there, that vision and leadership is what most people will actually gravitate towards. Yeah, a networking business can have a great service, a great product, a great comp plan, ground floor, the whole 9 yards. But if there isn't someone or a group of people, a team of people that are real leaders with the right community and culture, casting the real vision, it'll never work. I mean, I get pitched on opportunities daily. This is not an exaggeration. Usually multiple times a week, sometimes almost daily, I'll get pitched on opportunities. Okay. Because when leaders cast a vision for people, it helps them to see the big picture. Because the reason as a leader, this is one of the most important things that I could teach you right now, is if you learn how to cast a big vision, use those phrases I've taught before, like, can you imagine? Can you imagine? You have to learn how to paint word pictures into the subconscious mind of people you are trying to influence, talk to, and get to do something, right? Whether it's prospecting, build, and encouraging your team, whatever it might be, because this business is frustrating. It's more mentally frustrating than anything else. But if you don't know how, you have to take the time to learn to cast vision on somebody, or paint the vision for somebody, not cast it out. Like, we're not casting out spirits or demons here, but you want to present the vision of what the potential is, because most people are going through a very, very dull existence in their current life. Most 90%, maybe more than that, they're literally on the hamster hamster wheel, right? They are literally they do the exact same thing every day. They wake up to an alarm clock, they get dressed, they rush out the door, they go to they get in the line. I go to the gym at about the same time in the mornings, And I still can't figure out why people don't just make their coffee at the house instead of, I literally see there's a Tim Hortons by my gym. There'll be 30 cars waiting in line at this Tim Hortons. I'm like, yeah, you get a sandwich or whatever. But do you see what I'm saying here? It's like everybody is in a rut. Do you know? And if you get very good at painting a bigger vision, systems don't matter, comp plans don't matter. The amount of time you spent prospecting somebody doesn't matter, because if you can turn on that dream machine correctly, everything else falls into place. I promise. Okay. Now you got to define what you want, then identify the people you will need to work with and lead to accomplish your goal. See, not only is a leader casting vision and finding people that are doing the best they can, but to grow a big organization, you will have those people in your group that you'll begin to tell who are the leaders. They'll be the ones that contact you more. I mean, this is just my MO. Is if you're personally sponsored by me, you'll notice that in a lot of cases I don't reach out that often. I try to communicate with people the best I can, but I think it stems from what I did. I think people can burn themselves out by trying to force somebody to be successful. I'll paint the vision, I'll lead you to the cheese, but if you're not going to be smart enough to grab the cheese and eat it, there's nothing I can say or do, right? But that again comes down to painting a vision. If you paint enough big enough vision, you will have people that raise their hand and say, I want to go with this. And what's nice is then you have those conversations about leadership and about where we're going to go. Can you imagine? Think about this for a second. Can you imagine what it would be like if you right now were making $25,000 a month in residual income? What would you be doing differently? Would you still be going to the same job? Would you still be, living in the same house? Would you still be driving the same car? Would you still be eating at the same restaurants? Would you be ordering food from the left side of the menu or the right side? And you know what I mean by that. Where do they put the prices, right? Here's some practical steps. Know the way so you can show the way. Basically, I think one of the reasons, if you look at the people in our business, especially in networking, doesn't matter what your product or service is, the people that have recruited the most people all typically do things differently. They all say things differently. They all use different tools. Some people do home meetings. Some people just do Zooms. Some people do, three-way calls for 2 or 3 hours, and so on. That doesn't matter. Is what they're doing is they're masters at painting the vision because they know the way, and they're talking to somebody in how they're going to show them the way. Think about that. I hope you're taking notes on this. If you know the way, you can show the way. Like when somebody contacts me, if somebody wants to talk to me and ask me where I believe that I'm going with this business, it's almost like you either jump on the train because it's going with or without you kind of thing, right? Develop strong discipline. Let me talk about that. Discipline without direction, drudgery, and personal development with a purpose. Let me start with the first one. Discipline without direction is drudgery. You can be disciplined, but disciplined in the wrong things. Okay. I've learned one of the biggest things that I had to learn as a leader was to identify vital behaviors or / core tasks that have to be done. They were business building activities, right? They are the income generating activities, as you've heard before. And those are the things that you go on to. Now, direction with, discipline without direction is also, it's hard to recruit or prospect, not recruit, prospect every single day if you don't know if your vision's not big enough and you don't know the direction it takes to get there. That's why it's nice that the company has promotional steps. The reason that you have smaller steps along the way is so that you have a direction to get you to your goal. If you look at the incomes each position would potentially pay out, there's a reason you want to get there, right? And then this one right here, personal development with a purpose. I learned, I finally figured this out, I guess. Obviously you figure everything out eventually. But I figured out that personal development with a purpose was very significant, of a thing that I finally focused on. And what that means is I typically won't read anything without a goal in mind. Like I would never take the time to read a science fiction novel or something like that, because that's just not where I'm at, and that's not what's going to get me to my purpose, right? My purpose, like the books that I read, are like on the psychology of dealing with people, things to say, how they say it, how do you get large organizations, tribes, like, how do you build a community and a culture, what makes people tick? Because I'm not in a network marketing company, I'm not in a service-based company, or product-based company. I'm in a people company. You're in a people business. So if you learn to be a better people, and to be blind, if you learn to be a better people, you'll attract more people. People will be attracted to you because you're showing leadership. You're developing. You have personal development with a purpose. Okay, and I'll give you some tips on that. Um, let others develop their leadership. Now, once you start to get some people on your team, it's important to obviously let some of these people do things, right? Like, let others develop teams. Like if you're doing meetings, hotel meetings, home meetings, presentations, a lot of times I typically always try to invite people to do some of the trainings whenever I can, whether it's introduce people or whether it's just, get in front of the room for 2 minutes and tell their story of why they joined, because it's that little thing, because these little things build confidence, right? You help them develop their leadership. Celebrating the singles. This actually has to do not just with personal leadership, but in your organization. As you notice, obviously in our team and things like that, one of the biggest things that you can do is edify people and celebrate what we would call the singles. The singles are getting customers. The singles are enrolling a person. I think if there was a way to track it, to me, the most important thing, if the company ever puts it in the back office of how to celebrate something, would be the amount of maybe presentations somebody gave, because that's the behavior that I want repeated. And that's the most important thing I want celebrated. If I can never figure out how to do that, I will, because you have in your back office, it's kind of like, you see the results of it, you see the outcomes of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean where it came from. So celebrate the singles with your team. If somebody goes out and gets a customer, that's amazing. If somebody invites somebody into the Facebook group and tags 20 people and you see it and notice it, let them know that they're doing a great job. Okay. Those are important things. Influence the influencers. If you become a good enough leader, you will have people that start to raise their hands as an influencer, and you'll actually be able to have good conversations with them. Not necessarily about the systems in play, even though I put some great ones together, I think, for you guys, but you'll be able to speak with confidence, credibility, and influence. Okay. People embrace a vision or an idea if they take personal responsibility for the idea. How does this happen? Okay. A lot of times, if you want to get your organization to do something, you dictate it. You can't force it to be onto somebody. What you should do is introduce it to people in a way that they or suggest or ask questions that make sense for it. Like, I try to do this as often as I can. I mean, I know there's things that I know work, and I just will put them out there. But it's real important that you embrace a vision or idea. You help people embrace a vision and that they take responsibility for it. Because just like if you had a job, who do you think is more devoted to the business, the employee or the owner of the company? 100% of the employee, or the owner of the company, right? Because they've taken personal responsibility. Everything falls and hinges on the success of the company, really based on what they make the decisions on. Okay. Some other practical steps. Now, you guys hear me repeat this all the time, but I think that most people join a network marketing business for really two things: for the opportunity to make money and or the product or service. But they ultimately succeed and or stay in the thing, I believe, and this is held true as I've studied this out and tried to become better at it, is what we call the 3 C's. I usually just talk about the two, community and culture. The third one of this is commerce. Okay. Community and culture, commerce is just the services we offer, right? But when you take a community of people, you plug them into a culture or an environment that allows them to succeed, commerce is easy. Okay. That's actually if you want to know the success formula of building a massive team, a big network marketing business, it's this right here. You get a large group of people to do a few easy things over a sustained period of time. And if they have fun doing it because of the culture, all the money goes, you can't spend the money, you have to weigh it. Or you can't count the money. You have to weigh it because there's so much of it coming in if done correctly. Okay. Protect your culture. That's one of the things that I'm very, very, very cautious of. If I ever see somebody in like my team or there's not in protecting a culture is not about somebody having an issue that can be resolved, but if there's somebody that I believe is part of has been introduced to the community that becomes a very bad apple, they're Gandhi as far as I'm concerned. Like I won't tolerate that because what you tolerate will be repeated again as well. Okay. And we have, the good news is we've not had any of that problem going on with where we're at right now. You guys are all fantastic. And I think that's because everybody, hopefully I've set the pit bar and you guys have followed in lockstep with it. And we've got so many people that whenever there's ever an issue, everybody answers the questions for the team and so on. Okay. Here's one right here. Beware of entitlement. Culture determines behavior. Behavior determines results. Beware of entitlement. I can guarantee you 100% you will never, ever see me do anything that I would think of. If I do, you call me out on it, that would appear to be an entitlement mentality in this business. Because I've never respected people that just, that either, an entitlement is like not paying the price, right? And one of the reasons for that is if you start to, if you have people that that's their mentality, they're not leaders. Okay. Somebody can have an issue, but maybe they can either learn their way out of it, but they're not going to grow a big business. The most influential people that I've ever followed were the ones that went through the struggles, that built the character to take them to the next level. There was no entitlement. Okay. And when it says here, culture determines behavior, behavior determines results. I think that we've done that correctly. I think all that is falling into place. Now, here's the thing is you have to decide to create a high value culture. And if you do that, you're going to develop high value leaders. It doesn't, I remember Tommy Johnson talks about this all the time because he learned this from his uncle. I guess would that be considered his uncle, Carolyn, whatever your first cousin would be to Tommy. I always thought it was his uncle anyhow, because I always thought he was your brother. But he always talked about a story in one of his training CDs. His name was Bob Schmidt. He passed away quite a few years ago, but just chock full of massive knowledge in this area. And he talked about, don't show me show me the size of your army, show me who your generals are. Because a person with, if you've seen some of the things like Navy SEALs, let's just use Navy SEALs as an example. These are very, very small units, but their culture is everybody knows that the Navy SEAL culture is so high and so there's no entitlement there, right? They've developed the culture of the Navy SEALs that that if you're an opposing force and had to come to grips with being in front of those guys, being in front of SEALs, you're dead. You're dead. You don't have a chance because their culture will always crush you with a smaller group of people. And that's what, that's the thing. I don't know why I just went on a military rant on you there, but I just think it's important that a high value culture, if you do that, if if you expect things here, let me think about this too, about the entitlement thing. If you lower the bar, it gets to the point that it's not worth jumping over. If you constantly lower the bar, it's not worth jumping over, and people stop jumping over it. You can't always make it easy for people. Let's talk about the birth of chicks, baby chicks, the little chicks. Did you know that if you actually see a chick breaking out of its shell and you actually help it get out of its shell, in most cases it will die? But you thought you were helping the chick, right? What you've done is you've actually hindered the necessary growth that chick has to go through to do that. Same thing with a cocoon, a butterfly. Did you know that if you see a chrysalis, which is what the cocoons are, and you cut it open because you saw the butterfly trying to get out, that if you did that thinking that you were helping the butterfly will actually die and never fly? Most of you, a lot of people, I'm not going to point, maybe not most of you, but sometimes you can do that for your team to the point that you get them to the point that they're almost like on a crutch. Okay. Set the bar high. The first guys that I met in network marketing, there was none of that in the business. It was like, if you wanted to make money, you showed up at the events. If you wanted to build a big business, you did this. I mean, there was nothing to it. There was no deciding how it was going to work, or you knew what was going to have your success. Okay, let's talk about some suggested resources based on how you can continue the journey here. Anything by John Maxwell, obviously. Okay, you can get audios of John. You can get books by John Maxwell. He's probably the #1 world-renowned leader in leadership. I think one of the books you could read if you've never read it is Listening for Success by Steve Chaparro. It's a really, really good book because a lot of times people talk. Listen to that one. Bob Schmidt, who I just referenced a second ago, Tommy's family uncle, right? Bringing Out the Best in People by Alan Lloyd McGinnis. Absolutely 100% hands down one of the best leadership books you can read. And now this is my new favorite though, right here. This gentleman, his name's Dave Anderson. Most people have never heard of this guy. I am just dumbfounded that people have never heard of this guy. He changed my entire outlook on leadership, because Dave Anderson came to one of the big business conferences that we have at our church every year, where people from all over the world come in, and he was the keynote speaker twice, I believe. So he's done 6 total sessions there, the different days. And I mean, the first time I ever heard him, I came home and I cried, because I had been working so hard, quote unquote, working so hard in my business that I thought I had it down. I thought I had it down to the point that I was going to be rich, but it was not working, and my team wasn't following me, and nobody was listening to me in the whole 9 yards. And when he pointed out some of the things that I was doing with the entitlement, the culture that I'd allowed happen, some of the people I was, letting just get away with stuff in the organization, it was, I realized that I was totally off track. One of the greatest things that he always talked about being hungry and leadership and stuff like that is and I'm not going to go into detail on it too much, but he talked about the most vicious people at a karate place, at a karate, like a dojo, right, where you go there. Who do you think the most ferocious people are at a karate dojo is? Believe it or not, it's not the black belts. He said it's the red belts. The red belt is the one right before the black belt. And the reason is that's somebody who's really, really hungry for success and really, really hungry. But he said the problem is that a lot of times too, and this is kind of me closing this out, is a lot of times in leadership, once somebody obtains a title or a position or even an income, they kind of back off as to what they're doing. They kind of back off to what they're doing as far as what got them there, and they lose the fire. And he says, he goes, I used to laugh. He goes, I laugh at some of these big conferences that have all of these black belts that have these pot bellies on them now. and they're giving out awards, and all they do is just sit around and talk, where it's the red belts who are doing it. He says, have a black belt skills, but a red belt attitude and mentality and hunger. And he said, and that's what will create the biggest leaders you're going to ever have. So which book do I recommend to read first? All right. I would tell you, just go look up Dave Anderson, Learn to Lead. He has a podcast, by the way. I would daily things on there. Okay. But anyhow, guys, hopefully, did you guys get something out of this? Because I hadn't really talked in detail on the leadership part of this, and I wanted to put this down for you guys to watch, tag your team in it, things like that, as well as I'm gonna pull the audio and put it on my podcast that I just launched. I haven't told anybody that I've launched it yet, but I got a couple episodes I put up there. So if you're hearing this on my podcast, welcome, subscribe, and so on. And I'll probably put this also on my YouTube channel. But anyhow, guys, I'll tell you this, that the world is looking for more leaders, and whoever decides that they want to be a leader and step up to the point, our personal development journey takes some time, effort. You're going to go through some crap to get there, the character development, but it'll be worth it in the long run. And I know I'm still way off to where I want to be, but I try to continue to be a student of the game, and I expect that out of you. So thank you guys for being on here. Really, really appreciate it. You guys are rocking and rolling. And hey, if you'll do today what others won't, you will live tomorrow like others can't. My name is Mike Healy, and I am out. Peace. See you guys.